Good evening and welcome to the Malden Zone. I'm your evening host, Ed Lucey, and my guest this evening is Craig Spadafora, Councilor large here in Malden, and comes from a very well-known family here in Malden. And we got a lot to talk about. And Craig's not able to stay the entire hour, but if you're thinking of switching over to the Red Sox, don't bother. It's the last game of the year. It's been a long, painful season, and the presidential debate isn't until 9 o'clock. So you can stay with us with the hour. If you have any questions or comments of any of the things that we talked about, whether you agree or disagree, our phone number here is 781-397-8286. Craig, we got the election coming up, and I'm going to ask you for some of your predictions. I'm going to give you some of mine. Keeping in mind that I predicted back in the spring before the season started, and I'm not like Johnny Carson there with the crystal ball, but that if the Red Sox weren't going to finish in the playoffs.
So you're ahead of the curve.
Except I didn't know they were going to be last place. But anyway, the debate this evening, do you think it's going to matter that much one way or the other?
No.
Do you think there'll be any surprises?
No. I think to be honest, I just don't think there's enough. I think the president's probably going to, sitting president, I think Obama's going to win again.
Yeah. I had, my sense was earlier in the year that, statistically, if you go by the analysts, they'll say, if you get double-digit unemployment and you have a huge debt and it's getting worse in most ways, then why would anybody how could they get reelected? But then I think it's somewhat indicative of the Republicans' Tea Party mentality that in order to get nominated, you had to cater to those people that are very rigid in their attitude and approach to government, and therefore it made it difficult because oftentimes once the primary is over and the dust settles, candidates tend to move to the center, and in the case this year, that may not be possible. And on the other hand, my feeling was that even though it seemed that the president had a slight advantage and it was ahead in most of the reports that came along over the months, that came November when the people who were out of work, and there's a lot more than just the unemployment rate that they're throwing out.
Correct.
And the people that are over 50, extremely difficult to get employment, comparable to what they might have had before. And you've used up your unemployment, they've used up their 401ks, and they've maybe sitting back and say, how much worse off can I be with someone new or a change? And then I thought that might be the hidden surprise to an election where, although all indications were that he was behind all the way, maybe at the last minute might make a difference. But I think that 47% business with that YouTube and whatever certainly had them. So the consensus seems to be he's behind. They don't think his own people don't think he's behind as much as the polls suggest. But that it'll be still kind of interesting. And I think sometimes, even though there's not much time left, this thing at Benghazi is not going to go away. There's more to that story than they've been talking about it. They try to keep the lid on that. And sometimes incidents happen beyond your control, and therefore it could still have an impact. So I think there's a possibility he could win. Obviously, it doesn't seem to be at this point that he's ahead or closing the gap.
Yeah, and I think when you say, even you said, close. Statistically, it's close, but it's the electoral college you have to worry about in this country. And I think just the message or the vibe that I think you get from both parties, where, like you said, the Republicans have tended to go on towards a slash and burn mentality. In some cases, like you said, there are there's that shelf they're talking about, the cliff, I think you're going to have to, at one point, do something that's drastic right across the board. From tax increases on everybody and cuts. Yeah. But I think the way the campaign's handled, at least for Obama's sake, it's very uplifting. It's positive, and he's asking basically a second chance. And I watched both the elections, and Clinton made a very good point. It doesn't matter who the president was in the last election or the last 4 years. The economy was so bad, the world was in such chaos. Nobody. I mean, realistically, if somebody said they'd be lying to you, no president, Republican, Democrat, Abraham Lincoln, John F. Kennedy, they couldn't have come back and done a better job than anybody in office. And I just think you can't blame everything on one president, and you can't blame everything on the past president too. Yeah. But I think Clinton made a very good point, and I think that kind of opened some eyes for everybody and said, maybe he's right. Yeah. And it seems to be, at least in the media, unemployment's getting a little better. The housing market's coming back, but it will take 5 to 10 years.
One of the things that I find a paradox about Romney is that he's probably in a situation, if he had not got involved in the presidential election and decided to re-enter the political scene in Massachusetts, he would have had a hard time, I think, getting nominated by his own party, and I think it's extremely difficult winning an election. And yet, the thing that's he's like two people, to my view. One is that he got this exemplary family life, and you have to really give him credit for that. I mean, he's got a very, very nice family history, and no scandal has been attached to him. He's got 5 children, 5 sons, all of whom seem to be doing extremely well. Lots of grandchildren, as Mormons tend to have. And more than that is, in spite of the fact that, in theory they donate a tenth of their tithing of their income. I mean, he's been very generous to charities. A lot of the money goes to Mormon, but the point is, he has given the money, and yet you have that kind of a perception of a person, and then you have the political person, and maybe because he's been a businessman more than a politician, people just don't warm up to him. Especially, so often you have to meet people in either large groups or very quickly, and therefore, unless you make a quick impression like a Bill Clinton, that's your chance, and that's the end of it. Whereas, as much as he seems to try with those dungarees, looks like he works the night shift at Walgreens, doesn't work. It hasn't worked for him. So.
Well, I think that's what they said about this election, about this debate, they're trying to make, at least Republicans or his advisors, to reach out to the American public and make him feel like a regular guy. But, I think in my lifetime, Ed, I think the president who had both, regardless of politics, had that a genius mentality, and he had that charisma is Clinton. Well, I think Obama, I relate to him more. I'm not saying he's dumb, but I don't think he's as bright as Clinton, but he's got the charisma. I think Romney is very bright, but he has no charisma. And today, it's a media sensation, it's TV. 50 years ago, he probably could have been president. So I just think it is tough to warm up to him. I mean, I watch both of them with my wife, and, my wife tends to lean very conservative, but she just can't get used to, I think, kind of Mitt Romney and his approach. She agrees with some of his stuff, but the same token is, and you need that in the presidential election. And they said, if you look at when they break it down, the women voters are like 60% with Obama. So I think it's going to be tough for Mitt Romney, but like you said, anything can happen in the next 30 days. We'll see, though.
You mentioned, a thought flash for my mind, 50 years ago he could have got elected.
He could have.
Of course, 50 years ago, he might have 4 wives.
That's right, he could have.
Now, we also have a state election.
We do.
Not for state office holders, but for the legislators, which are the state senators and the representatives. They run every 2 years. And, of course, we also have an election for a senator, which is at the federal level. And we have a re-electing Republican in Massachusetts. How do you take that one?
I don't know. We talked about it earlier. I think it's going to be a close election. We're in a Democratic state, as I'm fully aware of. I think, Mr. Brown, Senator Brown, has tried to use his past votes, and he has voted independent. And I think it's the only way to be successful in the state of Massachusetts. But, I don't underestimate the Democratic Party of the state of Massachusetts. They have a very strong grass union. I think watching that last debate, personally, I agree with some of his analogies and some of his thought process, but I found him to be a little bit too tough on Mrs. Warren, and just that's from a standpoint of you could feel that the vibe between them was not a loving vibe, and I think it's tough. I mentioned earlier, if it was 2 men debating, you never think about it. When you have a woman there, I think people have you got to tiptoe into those waters.
One of the things that also came to mind when we were talking about this now is that 4 years ago, 2 people that they had a distinct dislike for each other absolutely was John McCain with Romney. They had a strong, and someone that I recommended a book at my last show last month, Game Change, which is a run up to the 2008 election, and it kind of gave you some inside information, but it talked about all the various campaigns of the leading contenders. And the other thing was that the McCain and Romney and the Clinton and Obama
hate each other.
Certainly were, and the 2 of them are out promoting their own candidates. So politics has sometimes these relationships have a shelf life of till the next election, and maybe that's the reason why you don't always burn the bridges. Maybe,
Correct.
The former president's thinking about his wife 4 years from now, and maybe McCain. I mean, what's left for him, unless they maybe want to
Cabinet.
become Secretary of State, yeah.
Yep.
Now, so what's your pick on the November election for Senator?
I think it's going to be a very closer than predicted. I would go with probably Senator Brown.
Okay, I don't think it's going to be as close as that. I go with Senator Brown.
Okay.
How about the Chaney and to say? And the other, that's in.
Well, that's in the was it the 4th district? Is that the 4th district?
It's well to North Shore.
Yeah,
anyway.
it's above us. The Globe said that he's ahead 6 with a 30% undecided.
Yeah.
I would say, and not just because he's Republican, I would say to say he's probably got a leg up on that, just because I think Taney and his wife's problems is more than the partisanship.
Yeah.
Just reading some of the excerpts in the Globe, a lot of the people said, I want it, and they were polling, a lot of the Democrats said, I want to see more on what he knew about his wife.
Yeah.
And I think people, it's just that change thing, and, I think you had a relationship, Senator, to say he's almost an independent mind sort of Republican, as much as, the press is going after each other. So I think to say he's probably going to pull it off.
Yeah. Michael Goldman came on my show back in the springtime, and he was a consultant for Congressman Tierney.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know about now because Tierney did a thing a while back on television. I noticed it was one of those political consultants there. It wasn't Michael, but in any event, maybe he changed. But I said at the time I didn't think he was going to run again. This is Tierney. I think with all the complications and controversy related to his wife's family and his connection to that family through obviously his marriage and whatever else, that after you that many terms in Washington, give it up. I mean, what did you prove by winning again? And I thought I told him at the time, I said, I don't think he's going to run. And I said, if he does, I don't think he's going to win. And since then, lots of the stuff that's come out has been more negative and more difficult. And obviously the other thing that's happened is now they start doing the political ads come out. So, and I don't, in fairness to the Senate, to say anybody that followed his career when he was a state senator in this area, he was not a Rush Limbaugh, Palin kind of politician. He was certainly he's strong in constituency services, but more important, at best, he was at worst, he was a moderate Republican.
Yeah, he was. He absolutely was.
Yeah.
Now, the thing I find fascinating about that is we're all focused on the country's focused on this federal election for us because they say it's very important to the whole makeup of the Congress, especially the House. I mean, the Senate.
Yeah.
You've noticed the president and a lot of the big name Democrats have not gone anywhere near Taney, and I predicted. I honestly thought if it was going to be that close of an election, I thought the president would have come in because the last thing any party would want to lose is. You lose that Senate seat, and then you lose a congressional seat in Massachusetts. I figured the president would come in and try to help him, but I think the fire got too hot. Like you said, the news got worse.
Yeah.
So I think he's out there by himself. I mean, he has a couple Democrats helping him, but not what he needs to kind of bring in
Pelosi came out, I think, from yeah.
That might have helped him, though.
Too many votes. But, now, in the election coming up in November, we have here an interesting phenomenon. We're getting in line with Senator Brown.
Yep.
I got a piece of mail delivered from him, nicely professionally done, and it listed all of the Democratic Party elected and former elected officials that are supporting him.
Yep.
And it literally covered a couple of pages with a lot of names. The interesting thing is, as I looked through the names, there were only 2 of them are current office holders, one of whom is a city councilor in Medford.
Yep.
And I think he's only a first termer.
Yep, I know him well.
And the other name, of course, was our own Malden State Representative Christopher Fallon.
Correct.
And I thought that, anyway, what's your take on all of that? I mean, forget about the Medford guy, this thing.
Well, I think, I actually was invited to that press conference with Senator Fallon, State Rep Fallon, and his speech was I knew Mr. Brown or Senator Brown in the House, and it was a friendship, and he asked me, and I did it, and I think it was the same kind of mentality that play that Senator Say did when he ran in this district. He had signs up and said another Democrat fought to say, and it was using that moderate stance and using his services and try to bring over those moderate Democrats over the party lines. He said, we agree on probably 98% of the things. and I need your support on this side of the aisle for partisanship, and it worked. I mean, Richard Desai did that in this. I remember the signs as a kid, and I think Senator Brown did the same thing. And I found it ironic too that only 2 were actively sitting politicians.
Yeah, and the other part of that is there was a letter to the newspaper the other day, which would be interesting, that indicated this was in the Observer about a local resident who criticized the state representative, and the comment she made was he waited till after the primary election to do it when you didn't have a chance to vote. And on the other hand, I think what may come out of this, since he's running unopposed, is not going to matter.
Correct.
But that it'll be interesting to see what kind of a blank vote. I think he got about 80% of those that took the time to vote in the primary. It was lightly attended. There'll be a huge turnout in November, and it'll be interesting to see what kind of a blanks occur at that point.
Yeah.
But he's popular, and he crosses party lines in terms of the people that support him. But from my own personal perspective, I sometimes think in politics, as it is in life, there's sometimes a story behind a story. And so his support of Senator Brown is not, I don't think, it truly is just the personal connection they've had, because I don't think they went to college together. They didn't go to law school together. I mean, he's not been in the 30-year reserve as the senator has. They don't live in the
same area,
whatever. And so they may evolve at some point in the future. Something comes up, you say, oh, that's the connection rather than a personal thing. By the way, I did get an email recently from a former city councilor, Michael Sheehan. I'm on his list, and I'm not too good at the computer anyway, so if I don't...
Did he endorse him?
No, but he said he was, what do they call, he's on Facebook now with the senator's wife.
Oh, Huff. Gail Huff.
Gail Huff. And I sent him an email, and maybe he didn't get it because, like I said, I'm not that good. So you're going over to the dark side. So anyway, I didn't hear back from him.
It's not always the dark side, Ed.
No. No. As a matter of fact, that's another point. Before you stray too far, and that's just election. There are some other offices, because you have to remember in Malden, we've got several choices. We have a representative from Melrose who represents Ward 5-2, which is the Forestdale area. We've got Paul Donato, who succeeded Mike McGlynn as the state representative. And he has four precincts, I think, in Malden, if I'm not mistaken. And then Representative Fallon covers the rest of the city.
And real briefly, too, I think for the audience, this is the first time in the state history that we actually have the ability to, if you live outside of the country, military or non-military, if you sign an affidavit, you can actually vote electronically. They're actually sending the ballots by email or fax.
Really?
And I talked to the clerk today, Karen Anderson. I think she sent out like 4. 2 were military, and I might be confused, but it was only 4 right now, but it was 2 by military, and 2 were residents of the city of Malden and residents, obviously, of the United States that were living abroad, and they can fill out this affidavit, and they can vote electronically now. So they don't get a ballot. They vote. They get it sent to them electronically. They print it out. They sign it. They can scan it or fax it back. So it's the first time in the history of Malden that they can actually do this. Yeah, well, so it's encouraging.
Yeah, it is. It makes it. But maybe some of these things that make it easy for voters makes them lazy.
Yeah, maybe that's true.
And then there's a lack of physical involvement, and therefore, and sometimes the reason I have some concerns about early voting, and Oregon is the leader of that area, is that you don't have to have a reason not to vote in person. Is that if you vote in September or the first part of October, there could be something dramatically occur between then and November.
You can't change it,
and then you're already
you're counted.
Yeah. One other office that's not paid too much attention to is the regional vocational schools. There are 12 cities and towns represented the Northeast region of Malden because of our location. And of course, it's a local cost because you're paid by the number of students that attend the school. And we've had for a number of years Earl Fitzpatrick, whose wife was on the Malden School Committee. Earl got elected some years ago to the regional board. I just found out tonight, looking at the ballot, that he's not running, and there's somebody else running she's running in Malden, and her brother is a former city councilor in Malden, is running up in Reading as a school committee, and he had that position another time years ago.
Before my time, Ed.
Before you did. Well, that's not before my time. But one of the things also as part of that is, even though it's a Malden seat, one of 12, when you go to vote, there are 12 names which encompass all the various communities, and you can vote for each and every one of them, or none of them, or some of them.
Yep.
So it's possible that if you had, and none of them are contested apparently, from when I looked, as I looked the sheet over. So
Yeah.
I guess, although I think it's a paying job now, if I'm not mistaken.
It is.
$7,000.
Mhm.
And anyway.
And there's 3 questions in the sheriff's race.
Now, yeah, and the sheriff has got an opponent, but I think he's made a very favorable impression here in Malden,
Yep.
replacing the former sheriff, Jim DiPaolo, and he's been active fiscally and visible in Malden, and he seems to have made himself, and he's got a good background, not only as a sheriff, but as an elected public official.
And a DA, too, wasn't he assistant DA?
He was.
He was
But
assistant DA.
I found that out recently. But one of the things is, there's going to be a huge turnout in November, and the thing is, there are 3 ballot questions.
Yep, there's 3.
And the 3 controversial ones, as a matter of fact, 2 more than the third one. But if you don't prepare ahead of time to try and make a mind up before you get there, it's going to slow down the process, and there's going to be a lot of people waiting in line behind you who want to vote. But the 3 questions, the first question deals with, and I just had some experience with that myself. There is, with the new cars, a dilemma in terms of if you have a favorite repair shop, if he's not a dealer, a franchise dealer, there are codes that relate to the computerized systems in cars.
And they can't find out there.
And they can't get them, and the result is that you don't have a free choice sometimes of where you have your car done. Now, I just had a problem with my car, and it ended up, I had it actually towed, but I was in a automotive repair lot waiting to be picked up, and the person who has a business here in Malden suggested to me, he said, "Who do you usually go to?" And I mentioned I usually have my car service here on Charles Street with Paul Fortier.
Yep.
And he said, "Well," he said, "you may not." You said you may want to reconsider that because there seems to be a problem in the acceleration, and therefore he may not be able to do it. And that's as it turned out. When I talked to Paul, he said, "No, I'll take it if you want me to, but why don't you take it to the dealer?"
Yeah.
So $1,200 later, and the thing is, sometimes in those situations you don't get a fair competition.
Yeah, because it's only the dealers.
Yeah, they got a controlled.
I think it's called the right to repair bill.
It is.
Right, the right to
Yep.
repair bill.
Yep.
So if you want your car to be repaired by your local mechanic, like you said, this will give them the ability to. I think it's a device too. They get access to read that code.
Yeah, and by the way, as part of my bill, they had to do a computerized diagnostics analysis of what the problem was, and that was $159. And even if they found nothing,
it's $159.
That's right, and it is a credit towards the ultimate bill. So whatever the expenses were, it was that plus the $159.
It's a copay.
Well, it's an added thing. Yeah. And now the second one is really controversial to a lot of people, which is the medication to end lives.
Yep.
Sometimes if you're terminally ill, and again, it's a lengthy kind of a referendum question here, but that and one of the things that, as I read through it, you have to take the medication in your own life. This is a process of 2 people acknowledging that they're aware and you're aware of what's going on, and that so you obviously have to be of sound mind, and only one of the 2 people that can be part of the beneficiary of your estate.
Yeah, so
they don't have a personal bond. And then of course it's the responsibility of the doctor to make sure that all goes down. But it has to be done orally.
Yep.
To commit the suicide, whereas in Europe, and Sweden in particular, I think they allow injection, and it's really like I think it's similar to what they do with prisoners when they give them the execute them.
Yeah, there's three different drugs that you put them together. It's lethal.
Yeah, and in any event, doing the oral thing that may mean, and it has to be. And it's just that you have less than 6 months to live, and of course, as I said earlier, you have to be mentally alert. So that's a toughie, and that has a religious and an ethical question, as well as a moral question. And the third one, which is
another controversial.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, California allowed this. They pulled back a little bit, but this is for the medical availability legally of marijuana use.
Yep. So I think Colorado did too.
Yeah, and
Colorado did as well.
I guess if you were to ask me my opinion, I think I would vote yes in question 1. Yes in question 2, and
No.
yes in question 3.
You'd allow medical marijuana?
Yeah, that's yeah, I would. Yeah, I mean it's controlled, and sometimes
I said that in my debate, in the when I ran for Senate.
Yeah, you didn't want to tax them.
Well, I didn't want. Well, I took a no tax pledge.
No new tax. Yeah. That finishes a lot of Republicans.
Yeah, so I got no tax. Yeah, it does. It does. But you're right. I mean, there are medical. There is medical science now that says it actually has some beneficial. Yeah. Now it's all about control, though, too. You can't have it like 7-Elevens.
No.
And I think that's why they pulled back, because everybody wants to. In California.
And in fact, in Massachusetts, it's supposed it's going to be non-profit.
Yeah, supposedly.
Yeah.
It'll be profitable.
Well, it'll be profitable for the ones who get designated as able to...
Be like a casino.
Now, one other thing, that maybe on the ballots, someone just left this at the office the other day, and I learned something which is always important. When you go and vote for president in Massachusetts, there are full candidates. So it isn't just Republican, Democratic. And this person left off this pamphlet, and among the various candidates are Barack Hussein Obama as a Democrat, Willard, Mitt Romney.
I didn't know that.
I see why he doesn't use the name Willard, because that was a rat that was in the movie, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, Willard. Anyway, then you got Jill Stein for the Green Party. You got Gary Earl Johnson for the Libertarian Party. Now, some of these people are not listed in Massachusetts, but they are in other states. Jill Stein has run before.
The governor.
Yeah, and she's expected to be on the ballot in the majority of states. Gary Earl Johnson is for the Libertarian Party. He's supposedly on the ballot in 50 states.
It's impressive.
Yeah. Virgil Hamlin Good Jr. is the Constitutional Party. He's supposed to be on the ballot in the majority of states. And you have Ross Carl Rocky Anderson. It sounds like a movie, cartoon movie. He's a Justice Party, expected to be on the ballot in at least 10 states. And Peter Lindsay, Party for Socialism and Liberation, she's going to be on the ballot in 15 states. And Stuart Alexis Alexander, he's the Socialist Party, supposedly expects to be on the ballot in 5 states. And Merrill Lloyd Miller, they got some odd names for president. You know, a lot of Tom, Dick, and Harrys get elected, but I guess they don't. You don't have names like that for president. But he's the American Third Position Party, and he's supposed to be on 3 or 4 states. And finally, we have Thomas Conrad Heffing, and he's on the American Party, which at one time had some impact. They were, I think, one
the
of
70s, right?
Sorry?
Wasn't it in the 70s?
Yeah, I think Arthur Boyle Jr. one time was a member of that party, if I'm not mistaken. But anyway, that's another bit of trivia. But so there's a lot of choices depending on what state you live and legally able to vote. And on the other hand, America traditionally has not been a strong suited country for third parties.
No.
And we've had very few of them ever do anything serious. I saw Ross Perot on television last night with his son. They were talking about things that he was familiar with, and I didn't know he was still around. He looks the same. And I think in the past we had an Anderson that ran as a congressman from Ohio, which I think helped get Clinton elected first term because he splintered the vote. But
I think the most important thing is people come out to vote.
And we'll get, they expect in Massachusetts probably 80% or thereabouts. That's why some of these things you should study ahead of time because people tend sometimes to vote before they go to work, and the polls are over till 8 o'clock. But if you can't make it at night, you say, I'll do it in the morning. But then if you have to be at work at 8 o'clock and you get down at 7 o'clock, you might be able to get in and out quickly. But if you go at 7:30, you may find out already the line is formed.
And absentee ballots are available, so you can do it.
That's right. That's always the option.
If people have trouble getting out of the house, or if they're an indigent, or
And the city makes it very easy.
Yep.
And
I think they've sent out 400 already.
Oh, they did.
Yeah, they're doing it right now in the clerk's office.
Yeah.
Filled to capacity. They got, I think they're 395 or 385 already. Already, they said it's way ahead schedule. So
they voted early. Yeah. We used to have my election as a state representative. My second time I ran, there was 600 absentee ballots, and I was the only part of the city.
Did you win that one?
I did not win that one.
That's why there was 600 there.
I wanted the polls though. Anyway, but so in any event, that's the national, that's the state, and that's the local election and the personalities, and we'll see how right or wrong I am. If I'm wrong too often, maybe I won't make any more predictions. But elections are an interesting phenomenon. There have been.
So who's winning president? I didn't hear you say that yet.
Oh, president. Well,
Obama.
Yeah, Obama, based
Yeah.
on what's out there now.
Yeah.
You know, I had thought, as I mentioned earlier, that there'd be a silent vote out there that would just go in there and say, you know, maybe we should change just for the sake of change. It's like the Red Sox going to do with their manager this
Correct.
week.
Correct.
And with baseball, it's easier to get a new manager than it is to replace 25 players. Which, by the way, I made a prediction on the Red Sox last spring that they weren't going to make the playoffs.
You told me that.
Little did I know that they were going to finish last.
So let me ask you a question. What happens with the Congress? Is it statement? What's the majority party?
Well, it would be pretty difficult for the Democrats to overtake Republicans in the House because of the numbers that they'd have to win. I think they may improve on the Senate because I think like snow in Maine, the Missouri situation, that's going to be the Republicans thought they had a good chance of that. They expected to win that. He made some comments that left a lot of people extremely uncomfortable and unhappy. So, if anything, I think at this point the Republicans won't gain anything in the Senate, and they may actually be off with another 1 or 2 seats because you have to remember that 2 of those senators that the Democrats depend on are independents. The Vermont senator and the Connecticut senator, and he's retiring.
Yep.
And the woman wrestler there, she ran 2 years ago and spent a lot of her own money, and she seems to be doing better, but maybe not as well as she needs to do in order to win. Because basically, Connecticut will be a Democratic state unless there's some.
Yeah, you have that woman McMahon, right?
Yeah.
She's the wrestler. And they say she's coming. She's getting a little closer. She's changed her image a little bit.
Well, she worked on it. She didn't start to decide to run in 2 years later than just start running. She prepared herself ahead of time, modified her some of her
$50 million.
views. Yeah, and well, anyway. But listen, if you got it, that's as good a way maybe as to spend it. So I give her a due. She seems to be doing okay. How about sex change for prisoners?
Against it. I was actually going to ask you that.
All right.
I just think, at the fiscal, the cost, we don't do that for people out of prison. I just think, I think the judge was off base, and I'm glad to see the governor and the legislator send down a message that, I just think it's way over the top. And they've been giving them, whether you call it a man or a woman, they've already spent, they've said, hundreds of $1,000s in hormone treatments, and they've been leading up to this. Yeah. So it's not like they're just deciding today. What do you think?
I would support it.
You would?
Yeah, I'll tell you why. Because first of all, when this thing first surfaced, he offered to pay for it himself. He had some money at the time, and I also believe sometime along the line the attorney agreed to forfeit a fee for the expenses. Once you get convicted, and it was a terrible crime. Certainly, you cannot find any reason at all to justify it or explain it away. But that when you have a person who's in a body that's not his gender, then right now to be given a female name to be in a men's prison, and I think professionally when they get to that point, and the doctor would suggest that it's a fair assessment that he's a woman rather than a man, then as a society, as it were, we are responsible for, you can't be cruel and unjust punishment for people. You have to give them some sort of a life in prison, and if professionally they indicated he should be operated on, I would say that's what we should do. What's worse, I think, and I didn't put that down as one of my things to talk about. I know you have to leave because you have another thing to do. Is the example of how government mismanages the process? Because we can talk about this thing as treating him in a favorable manner, either because it's a waste of money to do that for him, or worse than that is why should we do it for someone who murdered his wife the way he did it? But we have a criminal, the lab at the state level, where they've cut their budget, and then you look over to the probation department where they were given more money than the judges asked for, because the legislators and other people were loading up jobs for people. And so what happens, the priorities were so wrong that here there's no accountability. And my final comment is, you take Roxbury College, you take the crime lab, and there's others, and even the probation department, And in some ways, the governor seems to get a free pass, and I think he should be subjected to a lot of criticism.
Well, did you see yesterday that the sheriffs, there's 4, I don't know how many county sheriffs
The
there are.
Bristol one, yeah.
Got on and said that the governor's playing politics because his budget is cut dramatically, and it's like $190 million for all the sheriffs.
Yeah.
And the 2 Republican sheriffs only get $25 million, and Middlesex gets $5 or $6 million more than they need, and they have less prisoners in Bristol. And they've asked to have their money restored, and they say it's paying party politics.
Well, there may be some merit to that.
There might be some merit.
Yeah. And especially one of them is running for another office, or he planned to.
I think so. I believe so.
Yeah. He maybe lost. He lost in the primary. I think he ran against Keating.
But before I go, I'm running to the meeting we're having a live meeting on the senior center, which I think is on the government channel right now, for residential parking.
Yeah.
Which we require right now. It's a series of meetings we're going through, and right now it's requiring a sticker, which would be free. It'd be mailed out to you in your excise tax bill at the beginning of the year. The only time you have to pay for a new one is when you buy a new vehicle.
This is citywide.
Citywide parking.
Oh, has that been approved?
No, we're going through it now. But you know, the reason why we're looking at this is the mayor's asked us to revisit this because of some of the ongoing crime issues. Excise tax, getting the streets cleaner, and getting some more parking. What do you think?
Citywide parking?
Yeah.
Number one, I think it has a lot of merit. Number one is it will generate revenue.
Yep.
And number two, they could do some of that now without residential parking by requiring the apartment complexes to register people's vehicles so you'd have available those. And you see a lot of New Hampshire cars around the city, and when they don't, and they're there the next day or the next week, and 2 or 3 weeks later, they're there. So. Absolutely, and obviously the other thing is sometimes people will garage cars on paper in Chelmsford or Wilmington or a summer home down the Cape, and they're in fact living here in Malden.
The city of Everett, when they first did it, Mayor, it was $400,000 the first year in excise tax. But the other side effect too is we get people to find out how many cars are registered in one house, clean the streets, because we're getting a big impact by the commuters.
Yeah.
I mean, what they're doing is a domino effect. They're just parking further and further away. I mean, one time, Ward 5, where you come from, there was very little residential parking for the sticker parking because of the T. Now, because 4 has basically filled up, it's spilling over now. Parts of 5 are gradually asking for these stickers because the commuters are getting out of hand because it's so expensive to park in Boston.
Yeah.
And right now, it's a crapshoot for those commuters because they're not getting his ticket as much as we'd like to ticket them. So they say, hey, if I get a $20 ticket once a month or twice a month, it's better than the $300 a month they have to pay to park in Boston.
Yeah. All those spaces along in the Oak Grove park, that's like they park along the fence, so that's free parking because they're not in the T parking lot. But the right from the beginning of with the street all the way to the
down,
and I've seen it more than one time. But if you want to save some money, 2 ways. One is get off that monthly bill for water bills. With the computer system, they got people with multi-unit houses or who have excessive bills. You can put them in a monthly thing, but I see bills of people $15, $20, $30 a month. It makes
now,
sense.
the only downside of that, though, Ed, is what we found out is people now find out if they have a leak faster.
Well, that's
the only. I mean, I agree because you save in postage.
Manpower. That's labor intense.
Correct. I think.
And you pay. Excuse me. And the city pays the bank on all those checks that they deposit.
Correct. So I think what we have to start looking at using technology where you can request your bill electronically.
Exactly.
Like the credit card companies.
Right.
So if you want to do it monthly, so you can see it. And maybe you pay it, quarterly.
Yeah.
But some of the feedback we get from the residents, where if you had a leak in your house, you wouldn't know for 4 months, and the bill would be $1,000. That's But I think we use technology in that video. We scan those bills, you get them online, and you can pay online or pay with a check.
Yeah.
That's the way the world is coming to.
Yeah, and that.
What's the other thing? So you got monthly bills.
Yeah, which I suggested. I mentioned briefly one other time. When they do the budget, they should include on the budget the unfunded liability for the pension and the health care costs. City of Boston, they supposedly, we could do a whole program on just that because so many states have revamped their pension. But here in Massachusetts, there isn't the political will to do it, and government oftentimes only does anything when there's a crisis, and they're forced to do it.
Well, we're coming to that point.
And the City of Boston supposedly has an unfunded liability of $1 billion for pensions and $3 billion for the health care. And that's the biggest 8-pound gorilla in the room, is because a lot of times when people retire from government, even if they don't have a lot of service and they have a modest pension, the big carrot is literally the fact that they're going to get health insurance, and to some degree, in most instances, their spouse, if they have one, and they survive them, or their spouse survives them, they're going to get a benefit too as well.
Well, you brought it up, and I'm going to be running to it, but your son is the chairman of the finance again, and we've spent one meeting talking about, we had the management letter from our auditors, and they mentioned those are the two big things we're looking at right now, and we're going to be publishing them in the budget, as well as we're going to start working on a plan with the mayor to start putting money, some of the money we have, hopefully in excess, towards those bills.
Well, that $5 million that is free cash now, that is really literally all the money that was recovered from the real estate taxes that have been unpaid.
You got to wait 1 year to before you can use it.
Okay, but you can put that in the, start the funding the
Correct.
thing. But a lot of that money, I think, is interest and not the tax themselves. So I don't know whether I always wonder how they treated that.
Which one?
Well, they charge 14% if you don't pay your tax bill. So a lot of the money that they collected of that $5 million is not the tax, but it's the people.
Interest.
Yeah, because most of the time, the ones that are in that situation, they've gone for 3, 4, 5, 6 years without paying. So the interest compounds itself.
Well, we knew about that. I think one of the things I brought up with, because you'd see that as a council, what we owed in tax titles, all these outstanding bills, and Mayor Howard, to his credit, would never want, and nobody wants to take somebody's house. And what he had going for him was a strong housing market. So if you didn't pay your taxes for 1 or 2 years, your house was going up so fast in value where the city would never lose out. But come the last 3 or 4 years of his mayoral career here, and then you have Mayor Christensen coming in. Now you have these tax bills that get $100,000, $200,000, and the houses were crashing. So now we're at the point where the city had to come in and take it because I think there's a couple cases where the house was actually, the taxes worth more than the house.
Yeah, it was on Avalon Road. I went to the auction.
That's right, Avalon Road.
Yeah, went to the auction.
So I appreciate your time. I don't mean to run. I'm going to run over to the
You have to come another time and I can go through the whole
We're going to go through the whole thing with you.
Okay.
I'll come after the election. We'll go over your predictions. How's
Okay,
that?
all right, good
Thank
enough.
you, Mayor. I
Yeah,
appreciate
all right,
it.
my pleasure.
Thank
Great.
you.
Yeah. I had, last spring, I took out of the newspaper articles written by sports writers having to do with the Red Sox. And, people try to handicap baseball games, because football is where the big gambling goes on, particularly the Super Bowl. But I often think people on the inside, like the sports writers, staff, personnel, people that are employed by the clubs, they can't predict with any degree of certainty or consistency the performances of a team or a player. And they're in the clubhouse. They have access to players on a personal relation basis. They also know things from the inside because they're moving around the clubhouse to the front office. And that, as I said, oftentimes they nurture relationships with players, and the result is those players are giving more of an insight what's going on. But last spring in the Boston Globe, 5 sports writers made their predictions for the pennant race. Dan Shaughnessy, Nick Cafato, Peter Abraham, Michael Varga, and Tony Masserati. Of the 5 of them, they either picked the Yankees, or 3 of them picked the Yankees to win, and 2 picked the Rays to win the division. All of them had the Orioles last, and obviously they had the Red Sox in the hunt, so to speak, like third behind the Rays and the Yankees. Well, what we've seen is the Sox are not only behind them, but they're behind the Toronto, and obviously Baltimore had a great year. And although I think if you look back on the prior years, recent years, their biggest problem was that they had a bullpen that used to give up runs after they came in to preserve a win, and therefore it ended up the team would lose games they should have won. But what's almost like ironic or poetic justice, for those of you unaware of it, the person that's now running the Baltimore Orioles operation is Dan Duquette, who was railroaded out of Boston after his career with the Red Sox, and has kind of been in the wilderness for the most part since then, and that goes back to about 10 years. So anyway, he's redeemed himself. He's proven that he's extremely capable, and in the Central Division, all of those 5 had the Tigers winning. None of them really seemed to think the White Sox were going to do too much, but they were the ones that were in first place until within the last 10 days or so. And in the West Division, the Angels and the Rangers were the ones that, and mostly the Angels, they didn't even make the playoffs. In the National East, the ones that they were picking were the Phillies and the Marlins. The Marlins are terrible, and the Phillies with the huge payroll, including our former closer, didn't even make the playoffs. And in the Central, the Reds were for the most part picked, but the Brewers were also with it. They started out slow, but they finished quickly, and unfortunately, they didn't make it to the playoffs. And then in the West, the Giants and the Diamondbacks were the choices, but those in this instance weren't the result of for the ones that picked the Diamondbacks. They didn't do too well. The other thing that's kind of interesting is there's everything being computerized today. Baseball Prospectus for 2012 projections, and they gave us summary what they expected these particular Red Sox players to do, and you can this reflects on how time changes and how expectations don't live up to their fulfillment. Jacoby Ellsbury will see a decline in his power numbers. That certainly was true. He was in the top 10 in percentage of fastball seen last year, and will likely see more breaking balls and secondary pitches in 2012. He is projected to dip from 32 homers to 12, with his RBI total going from 105 to 71. Well, of course, in his case, as he had other years, he ended up getting hurt, missed a lot of games, but his power numbers certainly have diminished, even in the relatively speaking. The other ones they talked about was Carl Crawford, and we know where he ended up. They said he was going to hit 291, but he's going to only hit 11 home runs. Well, he not only didn't hit any much of anything, he hardly played the whole year. Ortiz, he wasn't far off the numbers, even though he only played 90 games. The catcher, Saltalamacchia, they had him down to bat 235 to the previous year to bat 247. Well, he hit less than that, and he hit the home run total that they said, but he didn't have a really good year with the bat. Dustin Pedroia, they said he's going to hit 315, and he was going to. And the other one was kind of interesting was Kevin Youkilis, who is supposed to continue his trend of spending time out of the lineup. His projected numbers reflect that: 291. 17 homers and 65 RBIs and 471 plate appearances. Well, in reality, he started off strong in Chicago with the White Sox, but the last time I looked at the box scores, he was batting about 240, and I think when he left Boston, when they traded him, he was hitting about 235. So I think after a fast start in Chicago, he kind of tailed off. I think his power numbers were better than he forecasted here. Beckett, they predicted a 12-6. Obviously, that's far away, too optimistic. Andrew Bailey, he was the one that blew the game last night. He was going to be their closer. Again, he was a person that got injured. He really didn't play much, but it didn't mean much. Lester was supposed to be 13-6 on the projection. I think he ended up 9-14. And Clay Buchholz is projected to have only 14 starts, and he was going to have a 7-3 record. The Gonzalez was going to have that kind of a year, and I think if you add his numbers in here with the Dodgers, he did as well as they projected. But again, it just goes to show that oftentimes when the players go to spring training, everybody's optimistic. When they start to play, everybody expects great years. And one thing about Boston fans, they love their players, and so when they disappoint you, you get that emotional reaction from the stand. And sometimes the other thing that happens is when you have a player like Eucalyptus and he's traded away, the people are unhappy about it because he was one of their favorites. But as was indicated by the results, not only here in Boston this year, but in Chicago, sometimes players peak and then their careers are in a decline, and the results are reflected in lesser production and lesser a factor in time being a main focus on your team. So, in any event, that was sort of a situation that didn't come to fruition with the Red Sox. They didn't do well. I'll give you another prediction, which isn't a political one. I don't think, in spite of what happened last Sunday, I don't think the Patriots are going to do as well this year as people keep thinking. I think that, and again, I'm far from an expert in football, but that if they do make the playoffs, I don't think they're not going to be Super Bowl contenders. And if they did make the playoffs, although when you look at that division, it looks pretty weak now. When you go past what happened to the Jets last Sunday and Miami not doing that well, and what the Patriots did to Buffalo, so they may win the division, but we'll see how well they do. I don't expect a lot from this year in terms of being in the Super Bowl. I'll be surprised if they get that far. And as a public service announcement, the Friends of the Malden Public Library are having a shredding day, and you know, in this day and age, we're all concerned about privacy. You know, people get hack your computers, they get access to your personal information, whether it be Social Security numbers, whether they be dates of birth, whether it be credit card numbers, and before you know it, you find out someone's putting things in your name, and you have to make a strenuous effort to get the thing resolved. Sometimes it ends up impacting your credit. So we're constantly being urged to destroy all those kinds of personal papers that you no longer need, whether they're old tax returns or old bank statements or old credit card statements. And then you say, well, you can tear them up individually, you can cut them up with the scissors. But here's an opportunity to do two good things at the same time. On the 27th of October, from 9 o'clock in the morning to 12 o'clock noon, the Friends of the Malden Library are sponsoring a shredding party at the old physical fitness facility on Exchange Street. That's right next to the garage. You'll go in one end of it and come out on Exchange Street. It'll be very convenient to go in and out. You can stick around and ensure that the shopping bags of personal papers that you give are going to be shredded, so nobody can ever access that personal information you don't want to have passed around publicly. And it's a relatively small fee. There's going to be more announcements coming out about it as we approach more to October 27th. But the important thing, you can get rid of all these personal records that you want to get destroyed, and be assured that they're not going to be available in any form, shape, or manner. And secondly, you buy for a small fee, you'll help a good cause. Because the Friends of the Library, they have this is an added fundraiser, but they do 2 a year. One in the spring, which is a wine tasting at the library. And if you haven't been in the past, just to spend the evening there and get an opportunity to see what kind of a magnificent edifice the library is, both the old building and the new edition. And they do, coming up also in October is the book sale, where you have an opportunity to buy individual books, DVDs, tapes, magazines of various types that are sold very modestly priced, and children's books, so that these two fundraisers allow the Friends of the Library to finance or support various projects within the library, whether they be the children's room, whether there be the need for equipment and other types of library accessories. The Friends, through their raising of the monies from these sources, are able to support the library for those things outside the usual budget. So in any event, the 27th of October, 9 o'clock in the morning to 12 noon, and you'll be hearing more information on it. And as I mentioned, and I'll repeat one more time, it's a worthy cause, and you'll do yourself a favor, and you'll do a financial support the library through the Friends of the Library. And so we didn't get any calls, but that there's also a lot of stuff going on here in the city. One of the things, by the way, which I didn't get a chance to chat with Councilor Large Spadafora, was that as you are aware, the teachers in Chicago went on strike, and it was a very vocal, emotional, and to some degree, unfortunately for the children, very disruptive. And I don't recall either of the two candidates taking a public position or being asked about their position on the strike. And some of it may be they figured it was a no-win situation, because if you support the teachers, that means that you're not thinking about the parents and the children, and if you support the children, the unions will think you're against them. But and in any event, I don't think either two candidates, and in my view, there would have been an opportunity for the Republican nominee, Mitt Romney, to take a position that would be consistent maybe with the governor of Wisconsin in terms of the union situation. And I think even though they seem to have some public support, I would certainly think parents would be unhappy in Chicago to think that they wake up and find out the children that they were going to send off to school we're not going to be in school, and now you have to make a choice. Where do you send them during the day? Where do they go while you're out at work or not at home? So it certainly was very much of an inconvenience, and obviously created difficulty for a lot of parents. So in any event, nothing was said about that, and I was really surprised. And I also attended this past week the swearing in of 106 new citizens. There was a ceremony held at the Senior Center last Thursday, and there were people of all ages, obviously both male and female. Some came with young children, some came with adult children, some came by themselves. And the thing that's amazing, I think, when you not only was 106 people sworn in, and they treated it like a courtroom. Once they had to bring in judges from Boston instead of people going into Faneuil Hall or the federal court in Boston. They did it here in Malden at the Senior Center. But it was 106 people from 39 different countries. It's an amazing diversity, and that's not, and certainly they weren't all from Malden. And of the people that were sworn in as citizens, 12 of them also, which is one of the privileges, you can change your name. So I assume what they did is that they turned around and anglicized their name from whatever country they came from, so that they would then have an American name. So anyway, it was a great ceremony. If you have a chance sometime to witness the swearing-in process for people who become citizens, you'll walk away more proud of this country in spite of our shortcomings. It really is a place where everybody, not everybody, but certainly lots of people from all over the world want to come here, and you don't see a lot of people leaving because they're not happy with the country, or they think they can get a better life in Russia or China or somewhere else. So it's an impressive ceremony, and one that you'll be glad you're an American. So I'm glad you watched the show, and it's the first Wednesday of the month, and I hope to see and hear from you next month. And again, it'll be after the election, and Craig will remind me of what I predicted and what the final results were here in the election that's coming up the first Tuesday in November. So I appreciate you listening, and I appreciate your time. And don't forget, 9 o'clock tonight, the first debate that's between the two presidential candidates, and it should be interesting, and hopefully it'll be informative.